Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It may help if you wear the headphones because the sound goes straight into your headphones and you may have a problem hearing. So I'd advise everybody to wear the headphones, please. Microphones. Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes, Minister, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Commonwealth Pavilion for this event hosted by the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust. For your information, for those who don't know, the trust was initially designed to manage the proceeds of the famous Seychelles debt swap for conservation and climate adaptation, but became something much bigger than that. Now, the title of this event, Translating Ambition to Climate Action, and you look at the list of speakers, it's going to be a bit different from what you usually hear. Usually when you hear the term translating ambition to action, you think of state parties, of countries, and you know what the narrative is going to be there. First of all, there's not enough ambition. And secondly, even if we're trying to increase ambition, there's a problem of access, especially for countries that are middle income, which are many of the states, small island developing states. We are lower to upper middle income and high income, and that applies to small states as well. And one of the complaints you'll hear a lot from SIDS is because of their economic category, they don't get access to concessional funding, they don't get access to ODA. The countries who will be speaking today have managed to get some access to funding, innovative sources of funding. And it is a story that hasn't been told enough. There are people out there who ask the question, how did you manage to do this? But most interestingly, and this is why we have a lot of organizations and our funding partners and development partners with us, is many people don't know what made these organizations agree to help these countries. So you're going to have some of the people on the list are actually working with the countries on the list. And one of the ideas is for you to, for the first time, maybe in many events, give us an impression of what attracts you to the SIDS, what attracts you to the middle income SIDS when it's so easy for lower income SIDS to get it. So this is the story we want told. Why were you interested in helping us translate ambition into action? Now, we start off by we're very proud that we're one of the few countries that managed to get a finance minister first to attend a COP, and secondly to stay at a COP. That's another innovative thing that Seychelles does. We always do things that are different. And so we're very grateful that our new finance minister, Minister Nadi Hassan, is the Minister for Finance, Economic Planning and Trade. He will take this off with a keynote address, because as a new minister, he was also fascinated by this whole story of innovative financing attracted by biodiversity and climate. Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. Thank you to all the persons and organizations who have responded to SECAT's call to further explore what small island developing states require to turn ambition into action. Accountability has occupied my thoughts in these recent weeks as the enormity of what needs to be achieved at this COP26 became clearer. While SEAs have rightly called on the need for accountability on the part of our developed partners and major emitters, I would like to remind everyone that there is also an accountability which rests on the governments of SEAs to represent and defend their people and all that is due to them in this global climate change debate. At the end of COP26, SEAs representatives will go back to their respective nations, their coastal communities, their women and children, and deliver the outcomes and commitments made during these 2 crucial weeks in Glasgow. What are we going to tell them? Seychelles, like Belize and Costa Rica, have responded to the call to be ambitious with extraordinary flair. SEEDS have no choice if survival is to remain on our agenda, and we are to lead by example. Embarking on a journey to protect 100% of our coastal wetlands over and above protecting 30% of our 1.34 million kilometers of exclusive economic zone spells out immeasurable benefits for us in adapting to the inevitable impacts of a warmer planet. These benefits trickle and possibly pour down into the livelihoods of our fishers, tourism stakeholders, and our burgeoning blue economy by enriching our marine biodiversity and protecting our coastlines. We know that this picture this paints is a promising one. But like any artist, we need the right tools, in the right conditions, at the right time to effect the strokes required. So here we are, in the middle or at the end, we can't be too sure, of a global pandemic that has turned the world upside down. Irrespective of its time span, we cannot ignore the vulnerabilities of the world which it has highlighted. I emphasize highlighted because as far as SEEDS are concerned, these vulnerabilities were always there, just quietly, often politely, pushed aside to deal with later after supposedly more urgent issues were addressed. As it turns out, and I will now switch to global warming language, adaptation was never secondary to mitigation. It was always just as important, if not more so, for us island nations, because the more we fail to sufficiently mitigate, the more we need to adapt. And now we are clearly in the era of loss and damage, because we cannot adapt fast enough or are in some cases unable to do so. The limits to adaptation are in sight. For reasons which will never make sense to us islanders, who have been watching our homes blow, wash, or erode away over recent decades, the rest of the world have chosen to look at us and our issues through lenses which have allowed them to look the other way. Until now. The growing consensus that financing mechanism directed to SEEDS have to be relooked at with a different mindset and different considerations tells us that we no longer have to argue as strongly about its necessity anymore. Almost every world leader who mentioned SEEDS in their remarks earlier this week here in Glasgow echoed the same sentiment. It's no longer a case of should we, but of how. Seychelles already has something to contribute to this debate. Our 2016 Debt for Adaptation swap for ocean conservation, sustainability and climate action, and sovereign blue bond have gained international recognition. It has placed Seychelles as a key player in the innovative financing arena and most recently recognized the UNFCCC's Standing Committee on Finance for the potential to finance nature-based solutions. Will we start talking about another debt swap? That conversation in 2021 will be a different one from 5 years ago. Our fiscal space has contracted. We have vital internal considerations to factor in which have direct impact on the stability of our economy. It is fitting that the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Change Trust, created to manage the proceeds of this debt swap and blue bond, would host this discussion today. And it's certainly my honor to support it. SEED's message has always been clear, but perhaps it is now better understood. We cannot undertake this endeavor alone. Seychelles certainly can't. We know very well what happens when partners come together around a table such as this one. Perhaps we create something new, or an obstacle that has always been there is overcome. These can happen. We can't come up with solutions when we talk, discuss, co-design, and build together. I hope that the discussions which will take place this morning, the ideas which will be shared, and the opportunities which will arise will help shape not just more hopeful messages for seeds to take back home, but also messages with clear steps and actions which are possible to pursue, explore, and take on. Accountability rests on all sides. We do not want to let our nations down. So we are counting on all of you to be the co-writers of a new narrative for the history that is to be written here for small island states. I look forward to hearing the deliberations this morning. Thank you.
Oops, everything's coming off. Well, that's us, Seychelles, always trying to innovate, always trying to push the boundaries, and never satisfied with our lot, whatever that means. So you can expect us to always provoke people into thinking in areas that they were feared to tread before. Before we go to our first panel, we have a World Bank video called Adapting to Climate Change, Seychelles' Ambition.
Seychelles, a group of small islands or large ocean states, blessed with rich natural resources upon which people rely. Our prosperity is directly related to the health of these resources. Global climate change is the defining challenge of our time. 800 million people around the globe are currently vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. This includes floods, extreme weather events, and sea level rise. Climate change is even more challenging for island nations such as Seychelles. In Seychelles, climate change is an existential threat. For Seychelles, it leads to increased intensity and frequency of severe weather, storm surges, as well as changes in rainfall patterns and a warming ocean. These changes threaten the very infrastructure that drives the country's economy.
We have a lot of infrastructure on the coast of Seychelles, and we have seen the impacts of climate change up till now, and we foresee that the impacts would be significant as we move forward.
Climate change has already had dire consequences for the island state's marine resources, particularly our coral reefs, and has also impacted the livelihoods of many.
The coral reef was healthier. You had lots of different types of corals.
I mean, we are seeing the seasons that we used to catch fish have more or less changed. The currents have changed. We have times that the currents are extreme, that we cannot fish at all.
With change comes the need to adapt. Under the Paris Agreement, Seychelles submits its nationally determined contributions, or NDC, every 5 years. In its NDC, Seychelles makes a commitment to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. It also describes how it is going to adapt to climate change. The country's blue economy is central to its adaptation.
The NDC will help us to look at different aspects of adaptation strategies within the country. So we've come up with a coastal management plan, being assisted by the World Bank. And this plan, we've inserted it within the NDC.
Adapting to change builds resilience, or the ability to cope with change and still live prosperously.
Well, I think one of the key aspects to adapting is actually involving all stakeholders around the decision-making process.
Now, more than ever, it is essential that we adapt, we restore and maintain ecosystems.
Like what they've been doing as well is like they've been like trying to regrow, the corals as well. So which means this is a good sign. So which means like some of the sites that we can say that we have actually lost, it can be like re-put back to normal, and slowly, even though it takes ages for the corals to grow.
A more resilient environment means more resilient people, more opportunities, and a stronger economy. In the current NDC, actions have been identified for 4 blue sectors for Seychelles to better adapt to climate change. Implementation will require resources from government, donors, NGOs, private investors, as well as the private sector.
So it's a combination of different approaches, which I think should help us in the long term when it comes to adapting and mitigating against climate change.
Seychelles is building its ambition around its blue economy to adapt to climate change. At the heart of its ambition is inclusivity. What is your ambition?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So we now move to the first panel. We have 2 panels, and we have 4 questions. So the 2 panels will share the questions among each other. So we'll ask a first group of panelists 1 question, and then another, and then we invite them back to ask. And hopefully, if we have time later on, panelists are free to want to say something about some other panel's questions. And the panels, we start mainly with countries as well as organizations that help us out. Then there will be another panel with organizations and institutions. So the first panel will involve the CEO of CCFAH. You just saw her. She's multi-talented and very good at multitasking. She just did the video for her own event. That's Angelique Popono, who we all in Seychelles are extremely proud of for what she's done with CCFAH. Unfortunately, we could not get a representative from Palau. We wanted someone from the Indian Ocean, from the Caribbean, and from the Pacific. From Belize is my dear Ambassador Janine Elson. Everybody knows her. She's a veteran. She's the lead negotiator for finance. You still are? I saw someone add oceans to it. Are you oceans? They said lead negotiator for finance and oceans. I saw that written somewhere. For OCS, yeah. As far as I'm concerned, that's in the past. I would vote for you to continue on that role, because we also talk a lot about blue carbon and our blue wealth. And someone from Costa Rica, have they turned up? Unfortunately. And from Pew, Simon Reddy over there. I'm sure he has a lot to say. He's one of the newest additions to this list here of organizations and institutions helping Seychelles. And to all of you, the question is, what are organizations and countries presently doing to work towards translating ambition to action? So we start with the now, since it's about translating ambition to action, is what actually are you doing? And since this is, I know, Angelique, your name is first on the list. Unfortunately, being from AOSIS, this is a country-led process, as we hear time and time again. I'm going to give it to Janine first, as you're the only country representative here, although we all speak for the country as well. So Janine, what is Belize now? What is doing to work towards translating ambition to action? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Jamo, and thank you, Minister, for such a very comprehensive, and I think you really hit on the complexity of the challenge we face, the leadership we provide, and the essential part of partnerships, the role of partnerships in moving forward and expanding and scaling up what we have. Now, this is a little clumsy on my head, but let's go. So Belize's latest NDC looks to scale up on what we've already been good at. So we've been very good at our conservation efforts in forestry, but we're expanding out. So we're looking now at marine conservation within that context. And just recently, we entered a transaction for one of the largest blue bond initiative, something around $360 million. And let me tell you what that means. So that's going to the point of translating ambition to action. Because already we have, on the forestry side, something like 60% of our territory that has forest cover. 40% of that is managed, so it's in our protected areas. We're going to increase that by another 5%. We have 15% of our marine and coastal systems under protection as well. We're now moving that up another 15%, and that goes to the whole 30% of territory. But to do all of that in the context of country with a very high debt to GDP ratio, unable to access grant or concessionary financing, we had to borrow the examples of the Seychelles. And we learn from each other. That's what leadership does. So we actually engaged and had conversations with Seychelles on this because we needed to understand what we were getting into. We needed to understand what it is really, what does this all mean? And we needed to make sure that the step we took forward was going to be a steady one and something that we would be able to deliver on. So we took innovation and our already existing conservation ethics or ethos, and we brought that together in the context of our NDC and in the larger framework of our sustainable development priority. So that's what I would contribute at this point.
Thank you, Ambassador. That sounds so familiar to us, Seychelles. And here also something which she's introduced is SIDS helping SIDS. We hear of South-South, but South-South is huge, giant countries and tiny countries. It's about SIDS helping SIDS. I'll now move to Angelique. I said she wore many hats. Angelique, apart from being CEO of CCFAH, she's also one of the Seychelles negotiators. And she also helped draw up the NDC, which has the blue carbon aspect of it. So Angelique, the same question to you. What is your organization and country doing to work towards translating ambition to action?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chair, for the question. As both Seychelles and the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, it's been an absolute honor to, as CCFAH in particular, to be supporting Seychelles' ambition. One of the things that's very clear is all of this is not possible without the strong political will of the government. And we've been able to partner with them, and we've been able to bring other partners to the table. We have many examples, and the reason we have such great friends around us is because of these established partnerships. And thank you all for responding to that call. You're an email away. It's amazing how our community is so small in that respect. So we've been able to support the government of Seychelles to integrate blue carbon within the Seychelles' nationally determined contributions, and really shown that we have a momentum when it comes to ambition. We protected 30% through the Debt for Nature swap. We've got the sovereign blue bond, but we're not stopping there. We're still going. We want to continue that leadership and innovation, and now we have this significant blue carbon ambition to protect 50% of our coastal wetlands by 2025 and 100% by 2030. And as a negotiator, let's not forget the words, if support is provided. So of course thinking about the partnerships to really realize what that could mean is critical to us. And CCFAH hosts this event really on that basis, thinking about how are we bringing people together and really turning that ambition that we have to reality by providing the necessary partnerships, financing, capacity building, technology transfer. I'm becoming too technical on negotiations now, but I can't help it. We're in the right room to really make these happen. And again, thank you very much for all of you who's responded to this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelique. If support is provided, we're coming to that part now with the first of our supporters, partners, and that is Simon Reddy from Pew. He's the Director of International Environment at Pew, and they are the newbies on the block in Seychelles. You won't be new forever if you leave it up to us Seychelles. We're just looking at add more members to the family. But Simon, this is exactly the issue of you hear it's easy to go for the low-hanging fruit is you go for the poorest of the poor, but they already get ODA, they already get concession of fund. They don't even have to make their case, right? What is it that makes organizations like those on the list here look around the room, the COP plenary, and say, that's the country I want to support, especially the ones who are complaining that they're being left out and they're not being looked after. So I would like Q's take on this. Why did you want to help Seychelles, Costa Rica, and Belize translate ambition into action?
Thank you, Ambassador Jumeau. And firstly, I want to thank Minister Hassan, yourself, Ambassador, and CCFAH and Angelique for organising this event and the leadership that you have all shown on these issues. Pew has a long history of working on marine issues, as many people know. We've also worked on climate. We work a lot on biodiversity. And NDCs for us was an opportunity to wrap a lot of this together. There's also an opportunity to work rather than on case by case, but on country level, which again is important in terms of scaling up ambition. And then 3 years ago, we started this project and we thought, well, who could we partner with? And to your question, Ambassador Jumeau, there were a number of criteria. I mean, the first one is obviously, have these countries got the habitats that we want, which is mangrove or seagrass or salt marsh? And then the next question was, do they have the political will? Do they have the ambition? Do they have the leadership to be able to take this forward? This project was a pilot project for Pew. We initially only looking at 3 countries. We want to expand that out. And so my job essentially was, I can't get this wrong. I have to make this work. I need to be able to expand this project as we go forward. And political will was one of the key criteria that we looked at. I guess the other key criteria is partnerships. We need, Pew does not have offices in many countries. So we looked to see who we could partner with, who we could work with in country, because this was all about empowering, supporting these countries. These are nationally determined contributions. They are not determined by the likes of Pew or anyone else outside of those countries. They have to be owned by the country. So how do we work in country to actually make this a success? And so, obviously we chose Seychelles, Belize, Costa Rica, but also we looked to work with other NGOs, Conservation International, TNC, WWF, and of course CCFAH. And then also we brought in, where there wasn't expertise, we brought in expertise to look at also information exchange. So we worked with CATIE, we worked with Smithsonian, Oxford University, University of the Seychelles, University of Belize. And so it is all about partnerships, absolutely crucial. Partnerships and political leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Rather than open this up to other panelists, let's go down the list, and then at the end, because we all know at UN meetings what happens. We have a lot of speakers, we always run out of time. So we have to do justice to everyone else. We go to our second group of speakers, and that's Marcia Toledo from TNC, who's over there. Uni Krishnan Nair from the Commonwealth Secretariat, Jürgen Vögel from World Bank, and the African Development Bank. Are they here? They're not here yet. But one thing you can see, one of the key things to this, you were saying it's political will. You're seeing it's also casting a net for the right partners. People always told me, when we partner with TNC, which for us is a huge organization, they said, well, TNC has its own agenda. And I said, so do we. Do the agendas match? Do they support each other? So we go to this, your question, and we'll start with you, Marcia, is what are your organizations or countries' views on the status of ambition and delivery of means of implementation, which in terms of the negotiations with finance, capacity building, and technology transfer? What is the status of ambition and delivery of means of implementation as we sit here at the COP today? How do you see it?
Thank you, Ambassador Jumeau. Thank you very much, everybody, as well, for the invitation. Zikar and Minister Hassan, it's a pleasure to be here today. The question is very relevant because it is, of course, one recognized there is some action in order to decrease the effects of climate change. There are commitments going on, but it is not sufficient. We are all in this together. It's a collective action. So we need to as well inform how those commitments on climate finance, how that next steps can be better channeled and can be better integrated to deliver the solutions that the countries are needing. So from the perspective of the Nature Conservancy, it's about as well identifying that leadership, collaborating, engaging together for common vision. And in what we are observing and all the opportunities in regards of being available climate finance, it's critical as well to channel what are those solutions that can be tackled to those innovative mechanisms, and how do we make sure that, for example, in this case, this COP has very centered nature. We want to make sure that the investments are allowing the solutions through nature, but people is at the center. We cannot forget at the end of the day that it's people who's going to be resilient, who's going to be adapted. So how do we articulate and identify those opportunities? But we need information, we need the science, we need the opportunities to explain what is the value of nature, to protect, to be resilient, how that we can incorporate that in mechanisms and in instruments that allow the channeling, further accessing across all the levels. And it's not anyway about just a deal or just a mechanism, it's about the systemic view. So from the side of TNC, it's as well recognizing that vision, that leadership, but approach in a systemic way so that we can say what innovative financial mechanisms can be relevant at what level. So we've been working, and in this partnership with Seychelles, of course, and in 2016, when it was released the first ocean debt conversion, was a milestone, but it's not the end. Exactly as what you said. It is the opportunity to identify what other options exist. We've been working, we have not only the blue bonds for ocean conservation, but as well resilient credits. We have reef insurance mechanisms, and this is all about integrating how do we channel finance using nature to deliver resilience, to deliver as well mitigation opportunities. And I agree with what previously have been said. It is required leadership. It requires commitment from the side of the government. The Nature Conservancy has to support, and it's more in a enabler, in a collaborator. It has, of course, more the capacity to support with science and with information, but at the end of the day, it's the decisions of the government, the decisions of the local communities, the decisions of the stakeholders in order to get this done sustainable. And for that, yes, I would say it's all about as well radical collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we turn to the host, our host here, who, for your information, also helped Seychelles draft its blue economy strategy, one of the first countries to ever put its ideas on paper, which we are now expanding on. So, Uni Krishnan, did I get it right? How would you answer that question about how do you see the status of ambition and delivery as we sit at the COP now?
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, CCFAH, for this opportunity, and thank you, Honorable Minister, for setting the stage. Yes, I like the idea of ambition to action, and of course the point on SITS helping SITS. So as Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, we have the CHOGM mandate basically to support member countries. Since 2016 we have been doing this, and so currently we are operational in 16 of our member countries supporting climate action, and including various aspects around NDC implementation, including the investment planning and bankable projects. So we have a climate finance, a Commonwealth National Climate Finance Advisor based out in Seychelles with this intent. But I definitely would like to look at the question on how the success stories gets replicated, because I think that's there's a lot for other member countries within the Commonwealth to learn from Seychelles, and also for many of the member countries to contribute to the efforts of Seychelles. So I was just having a conversation with the minister before this event that how the banking sector as such or the financial institutions as such need to be geared up to tackle this financing requirements. So as the Climate Finance Access Hub, we do have many of our member countries having long coastal zones and of course issues of similar nature. So what we are now trying to also do within our system is to share this knowledge between the countries and see if bankable projects could be replicated. And also like to fortify our effort, we are also, as part of the Commonwealth Blue Charter initiative, we will be placing a Commonwealth Ocean expert in the Climate Finance Access Hub specifically to look at the blue economy and to see if bankable projects, because I feel that in this COP, the difference is that now at least like people have started talking about action and practical steps to move forward rather than the rhetorics and the negotiation bottlenecks. So we believe in action, and so we are acting. And so our Climate Finance Access Hub advisor in Seychelles, Ms. Kai Kim, will definitely be leading this with the support of the hub and the support of the 16 advisors. So if it's one advisor going to a country, but it's being backed up by 16 other advisors having experiences from across the Commonwealth, I think that's the whole purpose of Commonwealth, and we definitely would like to stand by that and serve the member countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the World Bank. This is interesting for those of you who don't know. The World Bank, together with the Green Environment Facility, partnered with Seychelles on the world's first sovereign blue bond. Now, the perception out there is the World Bank is about alleviating and eradicating poverty, and you partner with a high-income SIDS. And wherever we go, people say, "How did you do that?" And this is why we like to have you here to give us the World Bank's thinking when they saw what we were doing, and how you think it could help the World Bank with the work that people traditionally think you do. Let's go ahead.
Well, thank you, and really happy, very honored to be here with all of you. You know, for me, this is also personal. You mentioned there's not a representative from the Pacific. I happen to have spent 3 years in Samoa for my PhD research, lived on the islands for 3 years and experienced what it means when a hurricane hits. I understand the vulnerability that people feel and the helplessness, you know, because I think of Grenada 2-3 years ago, you know, one event, twice the GDP in 1 day gone. You know, we don't have instruments at this point to really deal with a situation like that. So we at the World Bank, you know, we're really racking our brains around this one, because it's a very, very difficult one, particularly the higher income, middle and higher income SIDS. We got to find a way to get you grant concessional funding, okay? And we're working on it, believe it or not. So we've actually, in the last 2 years, really gone much deeper into thinking about, can we, for certain activities such as climate adaptation or, you know, the blue economy kind of work, can we find ways to channel additional incremental concessional funding to countries that normally are not eligible for it? We're doing it in Fiji, we're doing it now for others. We've doubled our engagement, we've doubled our funding for the SIDS in the last year and a half. So this isn't just, you know, talk. This isn't just technical assistance advisory. We were engaged with you on the NDCs, which is what we're going to do with every country going forward. But it's really trying to find a financial structure and a financial system that can channel funding where it's really needed. So we're committed to that, and I think we, you know, after talking, I've been in SIDS-related meetings probably for 2 decades. Like, and you said it very nicely in the beginning, Ambassador, what the narrative is, right? And I think we're now getting beyond the narrative. With the bond issues, we're getting, you know, we're finding ways to work together with others to pool funding and getting it to you because you really do need that. And I can only repeat what I heard, political leadership, but we see that. You know, I work with Fiji a lot, phenomenal political leadership, right? There are a number of countries around the world who have the will, who have the ambition, who are absolutely determined to do it, have a clear plan of action. So for us, and then the second one is we need to do this together. This isn't about the World Bank, this is about you and the country. And you have all these supports from TNC. I work with Conservation International on a very regular basis, World Wildlife Fund, others, because they all have the boots on the ground. They understand the situation very, very well. So we pool our resources, and you know, just we need to overcome that sort of thinking that there is no way out. And there is a broader conversation around, you mentioned debt for nature swaps, right? They weren't hugely successful. There were a couple of good examples, but this is not scalable. So we need to go beyond that. And I think looking into the future climate funding, it's not just nature funding, it's the broader climate funding. There may be an opening to triangulate between nature, climate funding, and the debt, maybe less the debt issue rather than the future investment portfolio that's there. That's a conversation we're having with the IMF and with many other partners. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. We've now gone through the list of all the panelists, and now we start mixing them up for the questions. Our third question is, what are the barriers and or challenges, but not all barriers are seen as challenges or vice versa. What are the barriers and or challenges for translating ambition to action? And we're starting with you, Marcia.
Excellent. Thank you, Ambassador Jumeau. So from our perspective, from the Nature Conservancy perspective, the barriers mostly identify or approach if there is that clarity, that commitment, how to drive a large process that allows for conservation and a systemic way where there's blue economy or there's integration of multiple solutions needed. So it is important, that leadership, and it has to be clear not only at the level of the Ministry of Environment, as you said, as well as the level of finance, and also informed and allow the participation of local stakeholders. And another level is how are we going to be also supporting monitoring and reporting mechanisms. It is critical as well, if we're thinking about adaptation, there's still a lot to continue to be developed, to better allocate, to better account, to better track, and also inform how climate finance have been effectively and efficiently implemented. And additional, not only in regards of metrics and reporting, it's also critical to think about the absorptive capacity of the governments, of the agencies, and the need for that exchange of information and experiences that success examples as Seychelles and as Belize can inform other countries that can have this potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Your next, Simon.
Thank you, Ambassador. So, I mean, barriers for us is going to be the finance aspect. How do we take a nationally determined commitment and make it a reality, or make and deliver it, basically? So, you know, we need to look at the financing mechanisms, because that is going to be the next, that's the crucial point in terms of delivery. But also to, and you know, and just to say that we are looking to work again with Seychelles, Belize, and Costa Rica. Having got the NDC, we then want to work with them again as part of our next project to see if we can deliver on finance. Some of the things that we're doing in those countries will hopefully aid that finance. Recently, we had a team in Belize, from the University of Belize, from Coastal Zone Management, from Smithsonian, and from Pew, out there surveying mangrove, taking core samples so we can actually work out what the carbon storage value is. All of this will, I think, support financing mechanisms, because the way I look at the financing is that you know, you need to be able to show what your carbon capture and storage values are, and the more information you can provide, then the more attractive that is for financing. And we actually have a team at the moment in Costa Rica, in the Seychelles, doing exactly the same. So we've been mapping the EEZ of the Seychelles to understand where the seagrass is, and there's a team out there at the moment doing what they call third-party verification, and then actually coring the seagrass to see what the carbon storage value capacity is. So all of that provides hopefully the data that is needed to make the financing opportunities for those countries more robust and more likely. In terms of opportunity, then I also think there's a real opportunity here with Seychelles, Belize, and Costa Rica. Having gone through this journey, and hopefully by the end of it, being able to show a methodology for delivery of an NDC and subsequent delivery of the initiative and of the projects, that they could become sort of ambassadors, leaders, pioneers, to work with other countries in the region in order to show other countries how they did it and how we can do that going forward, and hopefully then expand to other SIDS countries, to as many countries as possible, ideally, that this methodology and this opportunity to incorporate blue carbon into their NDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Before I continue this question, I was going to come to you, Jürgen. I understand Ambassador Janine here has to leave soon. You don't know how difficult it is to get a lead negotiator from any negotiating group in an activity, and it shows you how committed and how she feels about it. So we are extremely honored. Don't feel offended, Minister. You're our minister. You had to be there. But so I'm going to jump to a question to her so she can leave and we continue our conversation. The question we're going to ask you is, what needs to change after COP26 to take action required to meet the ambition we need?
I'm going to be taking a little bit of liberty here because first I wanted to react to what was said earlier. And I think we may have come up with, or we have coined a new meaning for the acronym PPP. So it's Political Will, Partnership, and People. Yeah, I think that's number one. Second thing is, I totally agree with our colleague from the World Bank that, the debt for nature swap or debt for climate swap is not the golden goose. And we do need to think beyond that. And so that's really important. And that concept of triangulating is very interesting. We do know that investment for nature is very low. We had that now 2 weeks ago, probably, the first part of the CBD COP. And there was a fund created and all of that, but still, we're not seeing the level of investment. The next part of that whole complex is the channeling. It's incredibly fragmented right now. We've put in nature, we have climate, we have disaster, which isn't really funded, but charitable humanitarian aspects of it. We have development. And then we expect our countries, these small island developing states, to figure out that entire landscape, figure out all the criteria, and then be able to create the data or supply the data and go through years. And we were on the board together at the Green Climate Fund. The stories are, it's appalling really, that we are suffering and we can't even get the money. So then we have to deal with that aspect to make sure that we're not just going to create more fragmentation in the finance landscape that makes it even more incredibly difficult for small island developing states and other developing countries, we're not the only ones, to access finance. So we need to address that. So what do we need coming out of this COP? We need a signal and we need guidance. We need a signal that it's not lip service anymore for small island developing states. 30 years to get to action is too late. So we need to be fast, quick, nimble in the next 2 years to make up for those 30 years. That's in terms of ambition for mitigation, but it's absolutely in terms of finance for small island developing states. There's no question about it. So in terms of guidance, what we need to see coming out of this COP and through MDBs and through our partners, how do we coordinate to ensure there's coherence in access for small island developing states and other countries who are simply not able to access funding, but they need it urgently. They need it urgently. Because yes, we're trying hard as we can to make sure that we can limit global warming to below 1.5, but the trajectory is already set in place. We still have that opportunity to bring the curb the emissions to achieve a below 1.5 target, but there's still going to be warming locked in. And we've already seen what just global warming at 1.1 or 1.2 degrees looks like. You mentioned Grenada, there's Dominica, there's Antigua, there's Belize. Belize, during COVID, had 2 hurricane strikes, and they were major. But it's the flooding, it's just an entirely different experience. I grew up in Belize. I've experienced hurricanes. This is a totally different situation. And then we have this problem of just dealing with creeping, climate change impacts, so the slow onset events. No one sees it. And then it's all of a sudden, your coastline's gone. And then I have to go to Green Climate Fund and explain that I have 30 years of data to prove that it was actually climate change that led to that. And then they decide whether or not they agree. So that's what we want, signal and guidance. It needs to be operational before we even leave this COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your time. Thank you for making time for us. You made us feel very special today. We always thought we were special, but you made us feel extra special.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So we go back now.
Yeah, just before you leave, I mean, I could not agree more with you, right? Let's not further fragment the architecture that supports the SIDS. We don't need another dozen of trust funds sitting somewhere. We need to build on what we've got. You have the World Bank, you have the regional banks, you have the institutions who have been around, who've been doing this for a long time. They need to be properly funded. We are willing to give, we have internal conversations. We want to get to $1 billion for SIDS, right? And we need to have concessionality in there. Don't fragment it. Put it, not that we need to do it, but use what's there. I think that is absolutely critical, because you're right, it's confusing, right? And it doesn't add up. And everybody has their own rules and their own questions and all that. That's not what's needed. We need urgent and quick action and funding for it. And we as an institution, we're working with our donors on a daily basis on this, right?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
So maybe just on the barriers.
Just a second. Go off and save the world and save us all. Off you go.
Go off and save the budget. Thank you. Thank you very
much. Before you speak, Jürgen, what I'm going to do now, because of the interest of time, I'm going to bring both questions together, so you feel free to do it. So we're heading towards the end. So the first question that I asked is, what are the barriers and/or challenges for translating ambition into action? And what I asked her, and you started answering, is what needs to change after COP26 to take the action required to meet the ambition we need. So we'll start with you, Jürgen. After that, we're going to talk. Uni Krishnan will have a chance, and we will end with Angelique before we go to our other speakers. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you, and I'll be brief in the interest of time. So there are a number of barriers, obviously, that we need to deal with. Simon mentioned one. If you can't measure it, very hard to get it funded. We spent 10 years plus on the forestry side. Many of you have been involved in this to get a proper MRV system where we are now beginning to really roll the money out big time. We buy these carbon credits. We are getting close to $1 billion now for forest in more than 10 countries. So after 10 years of RED Plus, it's now happening. Now, we don't have 10 years for the blue carbon, right? We need to do this fast. And so these initiatives that you just mentioned, but they are absolutely crucial. If you can't have a legit way of saying this is the number of tons of carbon stored in your seagrass bed, the money isn't going to flow, right? It has to be credible, has to be transparent, has to be third-party verified. That's the way this works. And we are strongly supporting that, and many of our partners do. The other barrier is still in people's minds, right? People still think there are always trade-offs. Right? You do this, it may not be good for development, or the money could be used for something better. In the World Bank, we have this conversation on a daily basis. And I don't believe it. I think the trade-off is not acting. That is your true trade-off in the Seychelles, in Belize, in all the places around the world. Basically saying, oh, well, maybe it's complicated. No, it's not. There is a clear growth path that works for people, for the economy, and for the environment. We see it increasingly country by country. But you've got to focus on it. You've got to really look for the green. You've got to look for the sustainable. You got to look for the climate implications. So I think one of the barriers is literally many of our economists who just, no, we can't. We can't build schools if we do climate. No, right? Don't think that way. There's a lot of win-win. So fiscal constraint we discussed, we don't need to spend a lot of time on, but what we are seeing, and maybe less so in small island states, but in many countries, they come and say, we don't have money for this. And I'm looking into their budget and I'm saying, you're spending How much on fossil fuel subsidies, and you're spending how much on your agricultural subsidies? Globally, about $2 trillion a year are spent on subsidies that don't have any climate value, they don't have any nature value. In fact, they detract value. So why not, particularly in agricultural subsidies is a very big one. Fishery subsidies is another one. You don't have to cut them, but you need to repurpose them. If you support your fishing industry, if you support your agriculture, do it in a way that it gets you a public good in return, that it lowers your footprint, that you have a better nature outcome. This is not theory, right? So I can give you, we don't have time, but I can give you many examples where you can say, yes, support the industry, but do it differently. Lots of good examples there. So maybe I'll leave it at that.
Next is the Commonwealth Secretary.
Yeah, thanks. I think from the climate finance access point of view, and if you look at the landscape or the value chain of the climate finance, from access to deployment to monitoring and evaluating the impact of that, I think you find a lot of gaps there. Starting from deployment, so access, basically, there's a lot of capacity gaps in terms of the kind of right approach, the right justification for access, as it was said, like how do you define vulnerability basically in terms of access. So that's, and of course the technology required to establish those. Similarly, in the case of deployment, so we've seen like a lot of challenges in deployment. See, even in emerging economies, like you access the finance, but if you look at the extent of deployment of those finance to the right beneficiaries, and of course to get the impact, you have very limited success actually. So you'll see like there's still many projects, the funds, the executing entity access the funds, but the deployment is still pending because of management issues, because of lack of flexibility in changing the systems to absorb this money. And the last but not least, the monitoring of the finance, and of course the transparency and others. There still need to be a lot of improvement on that, because that's the vital measure to see whether it's successful, whether it's making a change, because these are one-off projects. So we have also been talking about scale. So we need to see like whether the monitoring system is capturing that actually. So these are some of my observations. Thank you.
Thank you. We now do full circle. We almost started with Angelique. We're back to you to address these questions before we go on to our next speakers.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I'm going to, in the interest of time, just make one point. I hope this is just the beginning of a conversation. And we've had the opportunity to bring everyone here today. I've sat here and listened with a lot of appreciation and realized just how much work is going on in the background, but how much more we need to be talking to each other. So I hope this is just the beginning of a conversation. I hope we can continue the conversation, and we need to really find a way to institutionalize knowledge sharing. And I think the Commonwealth Secretariat touched on that. How do we institutionalize it? So we're not just waiting for COP to hang out one day, but we're really finding a regular way of having these exchanges. So I'll end on that point, Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelique. Now we have another speaker to introduce from another island of Ireland. When we talk of islands in a COP setting, that's not the sort of island, but it's an island that's really a friend of other islands which are in the developing world. Sinead Walsh is Ireland's climate director. Do you want to speak from there, or would you like to come here?
I'm fine here,
okay,
Ronnie, if everybody can hear me. It's great to be here. As you said, it's very comfortable territory for us among islands and friends of islands. I think, we were talking before we started, we're really in the process. I think we already see ourselves, I suppose, as focusing very predominantly in everything we do on climate on SIDS in general. And I think an area where we're scaling up a lot is actually on the oceans agenda in particular. So this is, as I say, a very fruitful session. I think some of us were in the room on Sunday signing the Because the Ocean declaration. I know Seychelles certainly is very much behind that, and we're now signed up to that. We're also involved in the World Bank Pro Blue Trust Fund that you talked about. So we're really keen to to learn from all of you, and who've been, as you've mentioned, decades in this arena, and see where we can play more of a role on the oceans agenda. I wanted to link it a little bit also to, and I will just say that all of our climate finance is grant-based and concessional, so just want to throw that out there, given what's been said. I wanted to link this also a little bit to the conversation on adaptation. I know it's not all of what we're talking about here, but it is a significant part of it. And I think we all know that adaptation finance is way lower than it needs to be, at least on the reports say 5 to 10 times, but I think we all know those numbers are probably vastly underestimated in terms of what the real needs are and where our adaptation finance is. It does seem, though, at this COP, I don't know how others feel, that there does seem to be a shift in the conversations on adaptation and in the conversations on loss and damage, which the Honourable Minister talked about in the beginning. I think we are seeing, let's see what ends up happening, but I think we are seeing more a dialogue and a sort of a change in tone and perception on that. But still adaptation finance is so much lower than where it needs to be. And we're very involved in conversations on this, and we have something now, and we've had a lot of conversations actually with AOSIS and other SIDS groups. We started something called the Champions Group on Adaptation Finance, and it's very much it's deliberately a group of climate finance providers, of donors, and that's deliberate because we have the responsibility, and we know we have the responsibility, and we're trying to get better as individual countries, and also kind of try to bring others along. And yes, it's about the quantity of adaptation finance, but it's also about the quality. And I think that's where a lot of the issues that have come up this morning are very relevant. Issues around quality, issues around access. And the quality issues, I think, are not getting enough attention because, of course, we want to talk about quantity and balance, and we believe in that very strongly as well. But I think some of the issues that have come up this morning around bankability of projects and so on, they really mean that we need a frank conversation about some of these quality issues. Because on the one hand, when we're trying to increase quantity, we want to sort of like give the impression that we have so many wonderful adaptation projects and they're just ready to go. But as operational people, I think we all know that we still have a lot to learn, and therefore sometimes we need to be more open about our failures as implementers, as donors, in order to then make those improvements, get the sort out the data, sort out the measurement, and then get more private sector finance. Because of course I'm talking from a public sector point of view, but we all know that private sector finance and adaptation is vastly lower than where it needs to be, but we also understand that we can't always answer the questions of the private sector when they come and prod on questions around adaptation. So hopefully, we can kind of bring out this quality issue more. And then the third objective of the Champions Group, and this has come up a lot, is issues around accessibility, and people have talked about the various funds, which of course we're also members of, and this urgent and pressing and ongoing need to make sure that the funds are more receptive to the needs of these countries, including SIDS. And of course, then there's a bigger measurement issue around ODA and so on with SIDS that, Ireland is very engaged in that conversation as well as that goes on. So, and then maybe just a final thing to mention to you all, and Angelique, you know this already, we're going to have, along with Fiji, we're co-hosting an event on the 10th with our Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Fiji Economy Minister, so another finance-related minister who's sticking around at COP, like yourself, Minister, and also with Mary Robinson, and it's a sort of looking at SIDS and oceans, but also that theme of climate justice. So it's in the AOSIS Pavilion on the 10th at 2 o'clock, and I think some people who are here today, I think you could add a lot to that conversation as well. So great to be here. Looking forward to Ireland, as I say, having more and more engagement with SIDS and on these sorts of issues. So thanks for letting me learn from your experiences today.
Thank you. We just thought we have the voices of partner organizations, institutions, developing countries. Now we have a developed country partner who's very interested in this conversation. Minister, when you opened this morning, we talk about ministers starting things and setting the tone. You actually did set the tone because you called for a conversation to be had on the issues that have been raised. And that conversation, what we're seeing now, is that first, as Angelique said, the conversation has been going on in the background, but not everybody knows about it. And Angelique has said this event has been one of the things that has brought it to the fore. So I'd like to give you the chance to do some final comments before we wrap up this. About 5 minutes, Minister.
Thank you, Ambassador. Look, I very much enjoyed the discussion this morning. And you said that I'm one of the few finance ministers that is still around. And there's a reason for that. And I think this conversation needs to come to the forefront, right? And I want to focus on one issue, and surprisingly, as a Minister for Finance, is the issue of access to finance, right? Because this is the big issue right now. And just to give a bit of context, as a country like Seychelles, we've been badly hit by the COVID pandemic. Last year, we had a GDP contraction of 15% and ran a massive deficit of 20% of GDP, which meant our debt went from 60% of GDP to 100% of GDP. And it took 6 months to negotiate the bailout program with the IMF, simply because SIDS doesn't get grant financing or concessionary financing. Now, with the new program we have, it's all about fiscal consolidation and getting the debt down. So the question we have is, how are we going to finance the climate adaptation? And the latest figures I have is it's going to cost us approximately $400 million. And at the time when we are obliged to do fiscal consolidation, there's absolutely no fiscal space for investment in climate adaptation or energy transition. So I think this talk about financing for SIDS needs to stop being a talk. It needs to happen now. Now is the time for it to happen. And for over 20 years, I've been listening to the discussion about vulnerability index for SIDS. It's not happened. And I think this is the time to make it happen. And because if it doesn't happen, we will not be able to implement what needs to be implemented. So this is where I want that discussions to go. And of course, the different partnership, we've spoken about the partnership. And that is extremely important because the financing has to happen outside the budget. It simply is not going to happen within the budget of SIDS. So this is what my message would be is, let's move the talk away from the talk, but to actions. Sit on the issue of access to finance for SIDS. Thank you.
Thank you for adding your voice to that cry. We've been calling for that for a long time. We've come to the end. First of all, I'd like to thank all the speakers and panelists, obviously the Minister, obviously a lead finance negotiator, but also the Commonwealth Secretariat for hosting us. They've been accompanying us in this voyage for a long time. And Marie-France and Anik, can you please come forward? These two ladies, come on. They are the people from the SECAT team who are responsible not only for putting this event together, but having a conversation that's begun. So somewhere down the line when we're saying this happened at Cop26, this happened under Marie-France and Anik. And so thank you everybody for attending, for making time for us. We have to clear the floor for the next event. And this is a conversation, I told you it would be different. I told you it would be a different conversation than the ones you usually hear about ambition and access to finance. And we will continue this conversation as we continue to engage with all the organizations here. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day at COP26. Thank you. Yeah, ideale.
Good day and welcome, everybody. We're going to start. Her Excellency, Secretary General, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers here present, and dignitaries, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and a very warm welcome to you all to our Commonwealth Pavilion. We are delighted to have you join us for this high-level event on the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, strengthening the climate finance loop for effective NDC implementation. My name is Uzamaka Wamara, and I'm Advisor Climate Change at the Commonwealth Secretariat. And it's my pleasure to guide you through these proceedings today, alongside my colleague and boss, Unikrishnane, Head of Climate Change at the Commonwealth Secretariat. Discussions on climate finance at COP26 is most prominent, with countries calling for affordable and predictable finance that ultimately gets to those that need it the most and fast, as we heard this morning. Through the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, we have demonstrated the leadership, innovation, and commitment in galvanizing requisite financial, technical, and technological cooperation, including capacity building, both human and institutional, for meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate change. Now, we have not done this alone, but together with our Commonwealth member states, alongside our development partners as well. And we are delighted to have you here with us today for this discussion to further engage on taking CFA to greater heights. At this point, it is my honor to invite to the podium Her Excellency, the Right Honorable Patricia Scotland QC, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, for her welcome and opening address. SG.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is a great delight to see all of you here, your excellencies. May I say how charming and good looking you look this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so honored to warmly welcome you to this our side event on the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, strengthening the climate finance loop for effective NDC implementation. And I really want to thank you. I'm going to thank you for taking the time to come and be here with us today. I know how many engagements you have, but this is a moment, I think, for us to celebrate. Small states and other vulnerable countries, including many in our Commonwealth, have recognized that climate finance is a major means of implementation for enhancing the level of ambition and implementing the NDCs. For many of us, the fact that there is supposed to be money has been a dream, but it was a bit like waiting for Godot, something that was spoken about but never received. And the Commonwealth Finance Access Hub, mandated by the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in 2015, helps our Commonwealth family to get access to the climate finance to support their climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience efforts. And I want to take this moment, if I may, just to thank Mauritius, because Mauritius hosts our climate finance hub. And without their commitment and their support, this hub would not exist. So a very special and warm thanks to our brothers and sisters in Mauritius. The Climate Finance Access Hub deploys long-term Commonwealth regional and national climate finance advisors to our member countries and partner organizations to support grant applications and the implementation of climate change projects, capacity building, both human and institutional, strengthening as well as cross-Commonwealth cooperation, and really sharing the knowledge, sharing what works, but also sharing what does not work. And the support provided by the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub is demand-driven and based on specific requests received from our member countries with wide sectorial coverage, including agriculture, water, energy, health, oceans, and coastal management, amongst just some of the issues that we're dealing with. The hubs and spoke approach applied by the Commonwealth Access Hub builds on the ground capacity of the member countries to access climate finance, but it also spurs the accumulation and transfer of critical knowledge across countries and regions for the replication and scaling up of innovative and successful climate action projects. Following its establishment in 2015, the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub has supported small and other vulnerable states with access to $44.1 million in climate finance, but we've got over $750 million worth of projects in the pipeline, the majority of which are adaptation projects. And I know that many of our other 32 small states would like a climate advisor as well, and we're working as hard as we can with our partners to make that a reality. Through the hub, approximately 71 training initiatives have been held with around 1,475 government officials being trained, thereby really contributing to both the human and the institutional capacity building on climate change right across our Commonwealth. And the hubs and spokes model is a unique selling point of the hub, whereby each Commonwealth regional and national climate finance advisor is backed up by the wider network, thereby enabling cross-Commonwealth knowledge management for effective upscaling and replication of efforts. So every climate advisor is backed up by every other climate advisor. And working together with our member countries who also possess valuable experience and best practice in NDC implementation, we are engaged across the loop of Commonwealth finance, including landscape assessments and mapping, strategy development, project proposal development and monitoring, reporting, verification of climate finance. And we're also supporting the climate public expenditure and institutional reviews, which are equally important for national climate planning and moving forward with an effective NDC implementation. And I'm also pleased to announce that we are set to engage a Commonwealth Ocean climate finance expert to strengthen and catalyse the delivery of the overall Climate Finance Access Hub mandate to member countries. Currently, only 2% of climate finance supports ocean-related projects. And we know for our small island states, we have 20% more ocean than we have land. And so if we don't deal with our oceans, look after our oceans, we, the big blue island states, are never going to deliver what we need for our people, nor for what we need for our planet. And we will address this imbalance working really closely with countries, particularly our small island developing states, in coordination with the Commonwealth Blue Charter action groups, and to ramp up our support to member countries through the Commonwealth Finance Access Hub and propel national climate action trajectories to the next level. We will continue to leverage and strengthen existing partnerships whilst also forging new ones. And to this end, I would like to recognise and thank all our partners for the excellent collaboration we've had so far as we look to the future. And I want to give special thanks to our partners here present, including the NDC partnership. And I know she's busily working, but I just want to shout out to make sure she knows I'm mentioning her. for the successful joint delivery of the Climate Action Enhancement Package programme, and to NORAD for joining hands with us and to helping us to work this journey. I hope many of you were here with us yesterday for the launch, or the pre-launch of our Living Lands core, which we are going to now replicate what we did in relation to the Blue Charter and really seek to implement the 3 Rio Conventions, which are so critical to those of our members who are landlocked, not just those who are islands. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I warmly welcome you to the Commonwealth Pavilion, to this side event, and I strongly believe we shall make a difference by making good use of this opportunity and platform to share our experiences, our views, and our ideas to support collective and stronger strides in our NDC implementation journey and wider climate action. And I really look forward to this session, to engaging with you. I believe that we have to meet these targets. That 1.5 to stay alive means we are at code red, and we can be the difference we need to make in this world to make sure that all our countries survive. So thank you.
Thank you very much, SG. Indeed, we are at code red, and we are the difference to make the change. Thank you so much. It is now my pleasure to invite our gracious hosts of the Central Hub of CFA, the Honorable Kavidas Romano, the Minister of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change for Mauritius. Honorable Minister, please.
Your Excellency, Your Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, QC, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, it gives me great pleasure to be in your midst this morning. On behalf of the Government of Mauritius, I wish to extend my profound gratitude to the Commonwealth Secretariat for hosting this side event in the margin of COP26. I understand that the objective of this event is to discuss how we can strengthen the climate finance loop for effective NDC implementation. In view of the prevailing COVID-19 context and the worsening global climate challenges, strengthening climate resilience has become a sine qua non condition for the sustainability of human and economic development of vulnerable countries. For small island developing states, SIDS, with inherent vulnerability to adverse impacts of climate change, you will agree with me that NDC implementation requires that the full array of support and international resources are effectively deployed to catalyze adaptation and mitigation measures. However, it has been observed that access to climate financing remains a major barrier. The Republic of Mauritius is highly appreciative of efforts being made by the Commonwealth Secretariat, inter alia, by extending technical support to member states and easing the process of access to finance through the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. As you are aware, the hub is located in Port Louis and hosted by the Government of Mauritius since September 2016. The hub program offers long-term technical assistance through in-country Commonwealth National Climate Finance Advisors, research, knowledge management, international partnerships, and advocacy. Excellencies, according to the 2021 World Risk Report, Mauritius is ranked 51st country out of 181 countries with the highest disaster risk. I understand that most of the island states as well as the NDCs from the Commonwealth members, are ranked amongst the top of the list. However, in spite of the efforts being made by government and partners, Mauritius remains one of the most exposed countries to natural disasters. Additionally, the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery estimates that Mauritius experiences over 110 million USD in combined losses from floods and tropical cyclones annually. Given the country's high vulnerability to the detrimental effects of climate change, the government of Mauritius has made a concerted effort to prioritize climate change adaptation and mitigation activities. This commitment was further cemented by the government's decision to host the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. It is also comforting to note that the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub has evolved within a short span of time over a period of 5 years. This has enabled access to financial as well as technical resources aimed at enhancing resilience against adverse impacts of climate change and disaster risk reduction in member states. Excellencies, the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub has strengthened institutional capacity and supported policy development in Mauritius and through the deployment of a national advisor on climate finance in the former Climate Change Division of my ministry, which has now expanded into a Department of Climate Change in line with the newly proclaimed Climate Change Act. Since May 2017 to June 2020, the advisor's activities centered on capacity building and knowledge management, as well as stakeholder engagement. Specifically, the advisor's main tasks were developing project proposals in response to relevant climate funding envelopes, coordinating cross-ministerial efforts to operationalize the nationally determined contribution and other climate-related projects, capacity development of relevant ministries and other organizations, and contributing to the implementation of the CCFAH through sharing knowledge and experiences. The advisor also complemented activities already being undertaken by ministries and other stakeholders, such as the Green Climate Fund Readiness Program. The Commonwealth National Climate Finance Advisor facilitated the preparation of 18 project concept notes and project proposals. These proposals covered a wide variety of sectors, including agriculture, marine and coastal management, energy, and water. According to the report on evaluation of the Commonwealth Climate Finance Hub, released in February 2021, through these proposals, Mauritius was able to mobilize £1.7 million and with £21 in the pipeline. I wish to acknowledge that the Hub has been in the forefront in preparing and developing pipeline projects and strengthening synergies for resource mobilization with multilateral implementing entities. This side event will further enhance awareness and sustain interest for financial institutions to seek partnerships with the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub to deliver necessary capacity required to deal with adaptation measures and mitigation actions at country level. You will concur with me that in view of the urgency of actions, there is a need for the Hub to play a more forceful role in the timely mobilization of financial and technical resources, as well to explore opportunities for strengthening the climate finance loop for effective NDC implementation in line with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. On the other hand, the National Advisor will be called to play a critical role in galvanizing supports from all sectors, including the private sector and other actors at national level. There is also the need for a good networking and a platform for sharing of good practices and lessons learned. Excellencies, I am pleased to inform that Mauritius has submitted its NDC to the Secretariat of the UNFCCC on the 5th of October 2021. The new mitigation target is a reduction of 40% greenhouse gas emission by 2030, based on a business as usual scenario of around 6.9 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, accounting for a reduction of around 2.8 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The total financial needs for implementing the NDC measures are estimated at $6.5 billion USD, with $4.5 billion USD for adaptation and $2 billion USD for mitigation. For the implementation of the Mauritius NDC, government and the private sector will provide resources to the tune of 2.3 billion USD, that is 35% of the estimated financial requirement, while the conditional funding amounting to 4.2 billion USD, around 65%, will need to be mobilized from international community and donor agencies. I am pleased to note that the Commonwealth Secretariat has finalized the deployment of a national advisor on climate finance for Mauritius for a second term, and the gentleman will join us from December 2021. The timing will be important, in particular in assisting Mauritius kickstart the implementation of the NDC. Capacity building will be critical in the formulation of bankable projects for projects on climate change. Here, allow me to thank the Foreign Commonwealth Office for financing the forthcoming capacity building workshop on the formulation of bankable projects. We need also support to develop guidelines and innovative tools to get the full collaboration of the private sector in the implementation of the NDC. The newly enacted Climate Change Act 2020 provides for climate duties, for which we need to develop guidelines for reporting, auditing, and also a mechanism for verification, that is, a guideline for measurement, reporting, and verification. Therefore, Mauritius will continue to actively engage with international partners, collaborate bilaterally with friendly countries, and cooperate with the Hub for capacity development, technology transfer, and mobilization of funds for the implementation of its NDC. Excellencies, I understand that the Hub is mandated to ensure capacity development of the vulnerable member states and is meant to facilitate long-term unlocking of facility of access to means of implementation of climate-related programs and measures, including nationally determined contributions, through capacity building, technology transfer, disaster risk reduction, and access to finance. For this specific purpose, the Hub places long-term advisors at regional and national level with small island developing states, least developed countries, and other countries in Africa to support national efforts to access and effectively use international climate finance. The focus is on supporting national priorities for climate action. Excellencies, I have no doubt that the Hub will continue to play a key role in assisting member states in building greater resilience in face of the looming challenges posed by climate change. The Republic of Mauritius will earnestly look forward to share lessons learned and partake in South-South cooperation. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Kavidas Ramano, for your keynote address and for the strong commitment to the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. Thank you. At this point, we're just going to watch a very short video whereby we'll be listening to the practitioners on the ground from our Commonwealth National Climate Finance Advisors in terms of the work they've been doing, working alongside their country supervisors. So please watch this. A climate change program is delivered through a flagship initiative, the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. We're looking to strengthen our existing partnerships, which we have with the Global NDC Partnership, with UNITA and the Africa NDC Hub. We also welcome the forging of new partnerships for enhanced support to meet the climate needs of Commonwealth member countries.
The NDC partnership harnesses the catalytic power of its close to 200 members to achieve the Paris and Sustainable Development Goals. Through our Climate Action Enhancement Package, we're pleased to be working with the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub in Belize, Eswatini, Jamaica, and Zambia to map, track, and mobilize climate finance for transformational mitigation and adaptation action, making climate ambition a reality.
Apart from climate change project proposal development, knowledge sharing, and capacity building, the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub supported the government of Belize in two important aspects under the CAPE initiative. A climate finance landscape study has been carried out, which provides a detailed analysis on the climate finance flows in the recent years, including challenges as well as opportunities. Based on that, a 5-year climate finance strategy has been developed, which provides an integrated and a strategic approach to the government to access finance effectively and efficiently. Beyond the CAPE initiative, the Commonwealth National Climate Finance Advisor will continue to be based in the country and provide direct support to the government to roll out this finance strategy and access more finance to Belize to meet their ambitious and recently updated NDC targets.
So also in addition to the support that I provide for Zambia in terms of accessing climate finance, in the last 1 year, Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub in Zambia supported the country of Zambia in terms of enhancing their NDC through the NDC. And under that, I was able to support in terms of 2 deliverables, in terms of climate finance mapping for Zambia, as well as developing an MRV of climate finance.
We are very, very appreciative of the support we are getting from the Commonwealth and from the Climate Finance Hub, including through the provision of the Climate Finance Advisor. We have seen ourselves moving forward. So far, we've been able to complete the CPIR report, which is our first step towards doing more work in terms of monitoring finance in the country. And we believe that it's going to take us very far, as we really need to strengthen climate finance monitoring in the country in order to assist us to be able to mobilize more. There is a lot to be done. And we have also concluded the private sector engagement strategy. This is also something that we need, because we believe that if we are all working together, we can do more and have climate action become a reality in the country. A lot of the countries under the Commonwealth, including Eswatini, are suffering from climate change. And with every support we get, we will be able to move together. And I think it will be good to see Commonwealth countries leading in climate action in the world.
Some work that we did with the Commonwealth Secretariat, where we worked with the Ministry of Finance to do some socioeconomic modeling, looking at climate budget tagging, and so on. And this for us is very important. It will put us in a good state to look as we move forward, and even for the Ministry of Finance to start to mainstream climate change into the budgeting process at the Ministry of Finance.
At a time when the NDC CAPE initiative is coming to an end, we are looking at as a beginning, basically, to work on the NDCs of the member countries and to work on investment plans around the NDCs and see to it that supporting climate ambitions and climate actions of member countries moving forward. So the Climate Finance Access Hub is committed to support the member countries in this initiative, and we look forward to continued support in the days to come.
So as we move forward, and in line with our country-driven approach in running the hub, we now go to the section where we hear from our countries, the country perspectives. I'd like to invite Mr. Unikrishna Ne, the head of the climate section at the Commonwealth Secretariat, to anchor this segment, please.
Thank you, Secretary General. Thank you, Honorable Minister, for supporting us in this event, and of course to take us through this journey. I think in this COP, the difference that we found in the negotiations and also in the discussions around is more on the word action. It's good to see that action is given priority over discussions, and action is given priority over advocacy. So obviously, we always believe under the leadership of our Secretary General and of course with the support of the government of Mauritius, we've always tried to act on this. And around the experiences of implementation of NDCs, I think there are a lot of experiences right now. So we have ministers from the Asian region, from the Caribbean, as well as the African region. So I'd first like to invite Honorable Parnell Charles, Junior MP, Minister of Housing, Urban Renewable and Environment and Climate Change, Government of Jamaica, to talk about the country experiences and also about the significance of means of implementation, including finance, capacity building, and technology.
I forgot I had on my mask. The mask has become a part of your body. Secretary General, it is always a pleasure to be in your presence. I feel like I'm somehow just getting wisdom by osmosis. So thank you for allowing us to be here. Minister, Excellencies, I was thinking a while ago of when I was a boy, a little boy, I used to like to throw stones and see the ripple. And I know that at some point in all of your lives, you must have thrown a stone into some puddle or river or pool and just watched how it ripples across. All of us have done it. And that's sort of how I see the unfortunate impact of these extreme weather events on a country like Jamaica. The thing is, the stones are large, the pool is small because our land mass is small, and so the impact is almost across all sectors. As opposed to, the larger countries where you may still see a ripple, but then it dissipates. For us in Jamaica, the last 20 years, we have seen on average an impact of between 1.8 to 2.3% of our GDP negatively as a result of these climate-related events. We've seen in 1990 to 2020, 30 years, more than $705 billion US worth of damage as a result of natural hazards, including 16 major hurricanes and flood events in our country. We've seen where past climate events have significantly impacted our infrastructure sector. Where in 2004, for instance, we talk of Hurricane Ivan as an example, we had heavy winds, rainfalls, flooding, torrential rain, $575 million US worth of damage to our country. And 62% of that was focused directly on damage to physical assets. And unfortunately, one of those ripples, Minister, was that damage was also to our schools. And so we saw 204,000 students being locked out of a space of learning. And so you have to see that ripple impact and effect on productivity, on learning, and the loss is wide scale. We also look on the impact of these climate events, not only on infrastructure, but on agriculture. And for Jamaica and other small island developing states, you understand the critical importance of agricultural productivity and food security. And so between 2001 to 2012, we saw around $253.6 million US worth of losses, which amounts for almost 20% of the total impact on our country of those significant climate extremes over that period of time. I say that to put into context how important it is, colleagues, for us from an economic perspective to really take a critical assessment of the economic costs associated with the natural event shocks, for example, the natural disasters, and also not just to take an economic perspective on the cost, but the impact on the welfare and the well-being of our people. I'm stressing, and I have continued to stress, that we cannot just look on this as a matter of figures and cost, because that cost, when you equate it, when you compute it, can be translated into lives, into livelihoods, into students who won't have the opportunity that we had. You know, everything has an impact. And so I'm particularly pleased about the effort that we have here, this comprehensive effort to develop the kind of economic models and forecasting tools that are going to allow us to use data to assess empirical information of our past so that we can project to a better future. And yesterday in my final interaction, we had a discussion with a colleague around 1.5. And it was very easy to say, well, we won't reach it. And I felt a weight in my chest because we are too comfortable. We are way too nonchalant with the discussion of whether we will or will not achieve these targets. And the perspective of different countries comes into play with the passion and understanding that you place when you examine whether or not we can not achieve these targets. For the smaller countries, for the countries like Jamaica that are developing, that have to contend with small economies, that have to contend with the potential of one catastrophic event wiping you out completely, we do not have an option in thinking so comfortably about going beyond 1.5. The question is, what are we going to do to get our colleagues, our developed partners, our friends to understand that this is critical? And I do believe that a big part of it is going to be strengthening our capacity to break it down to numbers. So we can help locally, but also help in terms of the discussion to give an empirical justification as to why we are doing things and why we are advancing the dialogue between financing and adaptation and pushing for not less than 50. And I say beyond 50-50 at this point in time, because the private sector will take care of most of the attractive mitigation elements. So we have to move to a space like the NDC does, where we provide the necessary support for countries that need it the most to be able to stand up and to build the capacity. And I think that this program is going to help us in taking into consideration the socio-economic implications of climate change in our economy. Not only, as I said, to understand the numbers, but to advocate for the specific amounts needed for us to do what we have to do. I'm going to leave it there, friends. I can talk about this for a long time, but I just want to leave one simple thought with you. When we finish this COP November 12th, what next? I go home to Jamaica. I do a couple press conferences, put on my navy blue suit, which I'm told looks pretty good, and feel good because I've come to Scotland. What next? What is our plan? Are we serious about using these economic models to make a difference in our countries? And are we serious about holding the developed country colleagues accountable? I say that we have to find a way, Secretary General, to continue this conversation and to continue it with the vigor and the passion that is necessary if we're going to get this done. Because we do not have the option of comfortably saying we won't reach 1.5. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for the inputs. In one of the speeches from a small state minister in one of the last sessions, she said we need signals and we need guidance moving forward after COP. I think in that way, Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub has always tried to support cross-learning of ideas and cross-fertilization of ideas and with the hub and spokes model, and we will continue doing that. And definitely, I think, Minister, your concerns are very genuine. So moving forward, I'll now invite Honorable Orlando Habit, Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management, Government of Belize. The floor is yours, Minister.
Thank you very much. A pleasant good day to each and every one of you. I know that I'm trying to follow up on what the minister from Jamaica said. We are also one of the most vulnerable nations in the region. Belize, I think, is ranked like number 3 in the region as a vulnerable state. Very important for us because we also are being affected by the effects of climate change on a constant basis. 2019, we saw a long extended drought period that caused a lot of damage, especially to our agricultural sector. We speak in some of these meetings about the problems we recently faced with the hurricanes Eta and Iota in 2020, which was one behind the next. But we forget that just a few years before, we had 5 consecutive hurricanes that affected us, and we lost over $500 million. The problem is, and I think Minister from Jamaica also mentioned, is that when we want to seek the assistance after these sudden impact events like hurricanes and the drought, some of the international community that want to assist us because it's an emergency, we have to declare a state of emergency for it to activate and trigger some of these monies that come down. And because of that, we are hurried to do it. And many times what we do is we look at the agriculture sector, and then we look at the infrastructure that has been damaged because of these events. We forget, but we feel 3 or 5 years later, all the social impacts that these events have, because now they sort of become slow onset events that are as a consequence of these short impact events. So these are some of the problems that we face, and they are really expensive and hard to recover from. And by the time you try to start recovering, the following year is here, and then you have other events coming along with hurricanes and drought. One of the issues that we have, and I think that's very important for us also, but before I go there, I just want to mention that in terms of the assistance from the Commonwealth Secretariat, I think Mr. Rangla mentioned Belize in the presentation, and I think that we certainly have to appreciate the landscape study and of course the strategy that was developed for Belize, and looking forward to continued cooperation with the Commonwealth Secretariat for further collaboration and cooperation. And certainly what we look forward also is for those areas where we can attract investment into these NDCs for the implementation of the NDCs. But another thing that we have to consider is that part of the financing that we need, apart from the implementation, is that we often overlook the capacity building, especially domestic capacity building that we need. And what we get often is exported or imported for us some of these technologies and innovation. And we forget that we have to build capacity at home, because for emissions reductions, if our country is going to go into renewable energy, we will be importing those solar panels because we don't produce them. We're hearing that the developed countries are going to be producing after the transition period or during that transition period, the electric vehicles. We will be importing those electric vehicles. We don't produce them. And so we need those innovation and technology centers back home, because we have very bright young students who can do these things for us. And so this is where we also need some of that investment and some of that finance expenditure to build capacity at home. I believe that from Belize's perspective, we look forward to the collaboration. We want to participate and look at the experiences of others, and certainly to build capacity from that area and also to strengthen the collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for the input. Maldives is going to be our new member in the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, and it's going to be the first member from the Asian region. So I'll now request Honorable Khadija Naseem, Minister of State for Environment, Maldives, to give a statement. Honorable Minister.
The Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, Secretary General of Commonwealth, Minister from Mauritius, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by extending my gratitude to the Commonwealth Secretariat for convening this important event today. Let me also take this opportunity to commend the ongoing efforts of the Commonwealth in addressing the climate financing needs of developing countries. We're indeed pleased to note that the Maldives' ongoing collaboration with the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, and I'm looking forward to a successful outcome through this initiative. Excellencies, as we can all agree, climate change is an existential threat to small, lying, vulnerable island nations like the Maldives. While impacts of climate change are heightened for vulnerable countries, the fact of the matter is that no nation is immune from the impacts of climate change. Despite the challenges we face in small island developing states in combating the crisis, and although the Maldives' contribution to the global greenhouse emissions is only 0.003%, we are committed to do our best. We are determined to show leadership and continue to advocate for more ambitious climate actions to address the climate crisis. Our updated NDC envisages to achieve net zero emissions by 2030, and this is indeed very ambitious for a small island country like the Maldives, but we will only be able to do this provided we get the immense support from the international community and our development partners. We are nowhere close to achieving our NDC targets or Build Back Better resilience plan just based on this. Excellencies, without a doubt, we face significant challenges in mobilizing financing towards the realization of our NDC targets. I'm sure this is the case for many of our countries. In this regard, accessing climate finance from various climate funds is a long-drawn, bureaucratic, slow process requiring high upfront investments to develop proposals to meet the stringent requirements required to successfully make an application. By the time our project gets realized, our situation is already different. Hence, it has been challenging for us to advance project pipelines into successful climate finance projects on the ground. And the main barrier for us in this regard is the inadequate local institutions with the financial and technical capacity to develop the funding proposals to access the multilateral climate funds. This is a key challenge that we hope to address through the support of the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. The relatively small potential investment size of the Maldives also remains a barrier in attracting institutional investors towards climate mitigation and adaptation initiatives, it is difficult to reach the scale, economies of scale, and this is another barrier for us. Furthermore, the cost of borrowing from domestic financial markets remain high, hindering the mobilization of greater amounts of private finance to climate-related investments. Excellencies, in addition to the existing challenges states face in mobilizing financing towards the achievement of our collective NDC targets, the current pandemic is a double blow for us. It undermines the ability of our economies to withstand extreme events, which are increasing in frequency and intensity. In addition, because we're also heavily indebted and must borrow more in order to avert a total collapse of our economies and societies, we're at a high risk of entrenching our public debt vulnerability as well. This puts additional burdens on our already fragile fiscal space to address climate change. So given the above challenges we face as developing countries, we expect the international community to step up in their efforts to raise ambition in climate finance and meet the $100 billion target at the earliest. We would also like to note the crucial role regional and international partnerships play in working towards achievement of our climate goals. So before I conclude, let me reiterate the support and assistance we continuously receive from the Commonwealth Secretariat in advancing our climate actions, and we really look forward to many years of successful collaborations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister, for the inputs. Now, I'll request Honorable Kausia Frederick, Minister of Environment, Rural Modernization and Kalinago Upliftment from the Government of Dominica, to share the experiences from Dominica, and as well, because we all know that Dominica has worked on the disaster proofing, especially the hurricane proofing of its economy. So I'd like to hear from you. The floor is yours, Minister.
Good day, everyone. Secretary General, Baron, Honorable Ramanu, Ministers, Excellencies, I'm honored to speak briefly on the importance of climate finance. As we are all aware, national determined contributions, or NDCs, are central towards achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Nonetheless, it is important to highlight that for developing countries, and more so, small island developing states like Dominica, with the absence of relevant infrastructure, the financial support needed to actualize the activities within these documents, progress towards reaching set goals remain either too slow to make significant global impacts or completely inachievable. There is a dire need for fast-tracking access to climate finance to support NDCs. This, in no uncertain terms, needs to come in the form of financial support that matches national circumstances and priorities. What equally important is technical support in terms of capacity building and institutional strengthening. This support must also be multi-sectoral, country-driven, country-led, and should be accessible in a way that is practical. If we are to fast-track, monitor, evaluate, and enhance our NDC contribution, we need to develop sustainable coordination mechanisms for implementation. While being asked to increase our ambition within each submission, it must be realized that these enhanced actions need to be met with enhanced support. Excellencies, 4 years ago, the Commonwealth of Dominica was hit by Hurricane Maria. It was a hurricane that developed from a Category 2 to a Category 5 in a matter of hours. This effect of climate change destroyed public infrastructure, private homes, businesses, agriculture, tourism, and the general peace of mind. Even today, we are not in the clear as we continue to be on alert for such similar events for 6 months every year. With the ever-looming threat of climate change, there's always a concern that a storm of this magnitude may happen again sooner than we think. Based on this major disaster, the Commonwealth of Dominica declared that it will become the first climate resilient country in the world. We say this based on the fact that our island is a small island developing state with extensive experiences that all can learn from. Nonetheless, we need support. And it has to be support that matches our needs, allows us to meet our priority targets, and considers environmental and economic and social justice. As we interact here at this high-level discussion today, numerous citizens across Dominica are continuing an old community voluntary system of lending a hand called Kudme, in a day calendared as the Community Day of Service. This Kudme means people are coming together for the betterment of the communities. It means that each individual has a role, just like each country has a role in these discussions. The efforts are centered on community empowerment and environmental stewardship. Folks are engaged in beautification projects, tree planting, solid waste management, and general maintenance of community assets, among others. It is clear that the model that best fits progressive action is one hinged on international agencies, government institutions, civil society, and in particular, the ordinary citizen at the grassroots level. Excellencies, this is why an initiative like the Climate Finance Access Hub is important to Commonwealth member states. It understands the intricacies of national efforts to be made by developing countries and offers practical support. We look forward to future work as we move towards the implementation of our NDCs and our climate resilience strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Now I'll request Honorable Beatrice Eniwer Atim, Minister of State for Environment, Uganda, to give a statement.
Wearing mask is part of life. Your Excellencies, and our ministers and ambassadors, my dear friend, the Right Honorable Secretary General Patricia for the Commonwealth, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to be here to talk about what can propel us forward as far as responding to the climate change is concerned. And I'm happy with my friend also Ruth. I've been engaging very closely before we came here. Access to grant-based finance for nationally determined implementation remains critical for the most of the least developed countries. And the Ugandans is one of those. National Climate Change Act, which we have just enacted in 2021, provides for the financing of the climate change. Promisingly, despite the limited climate finance flow, Uganda has progressed on and is being done as follows, a few examples. Our National Planning Authority and Ministry of Finance are developing a green growth financing strategy.
we have also support for nationally determined contribution partnership with the UK and the Netherlands. A climate finance advisor has been embedded in the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development to assist with the resources mobilization through proposal developments. And with the support from Nationally Determined Contribution Partnership and UK, the incoming facilitator is embedded in the Ministry of Water and Environment, my ministry, and particularly attached to the Climate Change Department to enhance coordination of government institutions and partners and is tracking progress of implementation of the climate action and achievement of the nationally determined contributions, among others. However, as a country, there's need for more and long-term support, both technical and financial support for national determined contribution implementation in my country. And dear friends, as we talk about financing here, I think we also need to be more realistic, that we shall not run at the same pace. Yes, the problem, as I've heard from colleagues, the ministers, seems to be cutting across the board, but the magnitude differs. And therefore, it's good that we consider our home-based solutions to this. And that is why we are making a contribution here. And then it's also important that we have to start with those who are ready. We might not all start at the same time. Not even the twins will work on the same day. So those who are ready, we have been talking about action rather than words. So those who are ready to go into action, we're happy with the Secretariat, Commonwealth Secretariat, supporting the membership. Please, let's kick off with those who are ready. Others might act as examples to encourage others to act. That one is critical, rather than tomorrow coming back to another COB and say, we discussed this and we are here again asking for the same. I also want to say that as we're asking for the funding, let's also factor in the sensitization of effects of climate change across the board. The colleague talked about the effect which has affected our educational system. But we need to bring on board the young generation to understand the effect of climate change. It is here to live with us. We have to mainstream it in all our educational sectors so that they are already embedded with this threat and able to adapt as we'll go along with the solution. We need also to highlight and pinpoint out the change agents. Who are going to be our change agents as we move into action? I'm happy to say that women are the greatest change agents, because everything is at stake with the woman, and then the youth with the energy. Then our colleagues, the men, can always follow us. Therefore, I take this opportunity to request the Hub to support the scaling up as assessing to this finance. Several concepts have been developed in Uganda, like irrigation for climate resilience project, energy access scale-up projects are already the offering in Uganda, and we wait for this financing. We are intensifying national institutional capacities in mobilization and development of innovative financial resources, and this is going on. I'm very strongly comforted when I see Madam Patricia, a very strong woman, very practical woman, that we live here not to go back and lament, but to go into action as his chair in that chair. And I pray that you retain that chair to make this happen as fast as possible.
I'd like once more to thank the Secretariat for this opportunity for God and my country. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Now I invite the Minister of Green Economy and Environment from Government of Zambia, Honorable Colin Zowo, MP.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Madam Patricia Scotland, Your Excellencies, fellow ministers from various countries here present. I want to begin really by thanking you, Secretary General, for the assistance the Commonwealth continues to render to my country, Zambia, during different circumstances. To see you sitting here again listening to us, I think is commendable. Before I begin, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, my fellow ministers, when I was coming here to this session, I just received a call from home that a flood had devastated my constituency. 300 people right now have no homes. The climate change is truly here. We are talking about a country, Zambia, which is struggling to develop, which has just survived or trying to survive the COVID pandemic. We're highly indebted. Yet we have millions of forests. For example, we have about 44 million hectares. This is the forest which guarantees the very survival of my country. This is a forest, the developed world, responsible for some of the biggest emissions, want me to keep. It's a difficult call. What do I do as I struggle to develop? I need to use this resource. How do you help me with finance to develop? The $100 billion as the Ugandan finance minister and various other ministers have spoken about is in word. Madam SG, fellow ministers, I'm being asked to come up with bankable projects. I've just said my schools are ravaged. I have no capacity to do that. I need your technical support. What is gratifying to Zambia is seeing my fellow countries coming together, and I call upon this strong partnership so that we speak with one voice. IPCC has already told us, and as an engineer myself, I believe that we are the causes of the climate change, and it's only us again who can reverse the trend. Our ambitions must be more. In my engineering background, I know that if you want to reach a target, I think you need to overestimate. We are talking about 1.5 degrees. It's a myth that we'll reach 1.5 degrees by 2030. We are already off trajectory. It's a myth that we'll reach net zero by 2050 because we are already off trajectory. It's worse now that our measurements are not spot on. We don't know whether we are doing the right things. We don't know whether all of us will really stick to the NDCs as tabulated, as given. We face a difficult challenge. So the call really is on the Commonwealth, the various countries, the island countries who are being devastated so much. But believe me, despite being centrally located in Africa, we're experiencing severe droughts and more frequent, leading to us getting our scarce resources away from the development agenda to taking care of our people, because the food security is not guaranteed there. The floods are destroying our infrastructure, leading to us using our meager resources for corrections. So this is a core. And what troubles me also is that there's a drive now for a lot of private finance. We call upon USG with my least developed countries here to promote giving us more grants rather than the usual debt, because we'll be more indebted, leaving us with no capacity to meet our NDCs, leaving us no capacity to develop our economies. So I wish to thank the NDC partnership for the support provided to Zambia through the Action Enhancement Program, which was implemented through the Commonwealth, COMESA, and the UNDP. This support enabled the country to revise and update its NDC expeditiously, and we managed to submit our NDC by the end of December 2020 and later resubmitted in July 2021. I would like to assure the partnership that Zambia remains committed to the partnership, and we look forward to more collaboration as we now have a dedicated Ministry of Green Economy with a mandate of promoting the effective sustainable use of the environment, while at the same time facilitating support for adaptation to and mitigation of the effects of climate change as we transition to a green economy. Excellencies, Ministers, Secretary General, some of the possible areas of collaboration that we need the support of the partnership will be to elaborate adaptation indicators, to formulate a green growth strategy, revision of our national policy on climate change, as well as finalization for us in Zambia of the climate change bill. I'm glad to tell you that yesterday, I think it's the Prime Minister of Ecuador, we got a copy of theirs. I think that's the kind of collaboration I'm talking about here. We will learn from them. And I call upon my fellow countries here, let's come together and teach each other, because we are in it, this together. We contributed very little, but the effects are more on us. We can only work together, better together. So successful NDC implementation and achievement of the global 2-degree goal will not be possible without meaningful collaboration between public and private sectors. Additionally, strong institutional arrangements and mechanisms for coordination among these actors will be needed to successfully implement the NDCs. So private sector actors will play a key role in NDC implementation, both as financiers as implementers of initiatives with climate change-related benefits. My government has begun to identify entry points for private sector involvement and exploring opportunities to create enabling environments for private investments. In order to achieve the global climate goal, Zambia will be guided by long-term visions and sectoral planning processes as we seek to achieve shorter-term targets. I wish to conclude, Madam Secretary General, fellow ministers, by emphasizing the need for technical support and capacity building in the preparation of bankable projects proposals. This is one of the key tools that will help developing countries like mine leverage the much needed financing for meaningful and impactful climate actions. I wish to invite the NDC partnership to continue supporting us in implementing our pledged NDC's actions and continue creating an enabling environment through capacity building and the preparation of bankable projects. Yes, indeed, we've been promised. Yes, indeed, we accept some of the responsibilities. Yes, indeed, the very natural resources we've been advised to slow down on are the very natural resources we need to develop our economies. We call upon the developed countries to up the ambition. We call upon you, Secretary General, to lead us as you've been leading us always. We call upon Minister Ramano and all the other ministers present here that the core is that together, environment knows no boundaries, climate action knows no boundaries. Together, we can get the possible deals out of this. Acting alone will be weak. I thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for your strong statement. Colleagues, our countries have spoken. We've heard. What next? We've heard the keyword action. How do we take action? At this point, we would like to invite our development partners up to the stage to help us with that answer, to give us the guidelines and signals that we've heard being requested for. So let me invite Mr. Jahan Chowdhury, the Director of Country Engagement of the Global NDC Partnership, to the stage, please. I would also invite Mr. Stig Travik, Director of Climate, Energy and Environment with the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation. Mr. Chowdhury. So we've been working together with the NDC Partnership and the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub for over a year and a half now, going to 2 years. We've worked closely together on the Climate Action Enhancement Package program. And based on the discussions today, especially in terms of ramping up, scaling up action, what would you say has been the learning experience in terms of the planning and taking forward the NDCs from documents to action on the ground? And how do you see us going further beyond our 4 member countries we've supported, but across the Commonwealth?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I think the financing starts from costing. And recently what we have started doing is costing the NDCs. And so far, it has been a quick, dirty work, but so far we have costed 35 NDCs in the developing countries. And the costing amount is $2 trillion only for 35 countries over the next 10 years. If you disaggregate this, for the upper income countries, we are looking at a GDP of 10% on an annual basis to implement the NDCs. If you look at lower income countries, we are looking at 6% of the GDP to implement the NDCs. We have 3 options. If I look at the left, which is the public sector, imagine, we have 3 options. One is we can aggressively increase the tax revenue collection. Second, we can do inter-budgetary transfer, meaning social sector resources going to climate financing. And third, you can increase the debt ceiling. Now, none of these options, ministers, they are politically feasible. And that is just the reality. If I look at my right-hand side, and I'm talking about the private sector here, $2 trillion is equivalent to 2 Tesla companies only. If you look at what was the announcement yesterday, GFANS, for example, they are controlling asset of $130 trillion. So if I look at the right, that 2 trillion is actually nothing. The question is, why, after so much of announcements, so many announcements, we are not seeing enough private sector financing going into the countries? And this is where the advisors come in. The NDCs tell us what to do. It doesn't necessarily tell us how to do it. And this is where the climate finance advisors can play a critical role. It is important to connect the dots between what the private sector is saying and what is the public sector saying. At this stage, we are dancing in 2 different rooms with 2 different types of music. What the finance advisors are there to do is synchronize that dancing. And that is going to be critical, creating the link between the NDCs and net zero and ESG. And finally, I would say what the finance advisors have been doing is identifying the resources, not just looking externally, but importantly, internally when it comes to national development banks, as well as the commercial banks. So let's not just focus on outward resource mobilization. Let's also focus on inward resource mobilizations. So that has been so far the impact of the climate financiers, connecting the dots, looking inward to mobilize resources, and giving shape and form to those NDCs. What we would suggest, we have been working with Commonwealth Secretariat for 4 countries. That's not sufficient. We need to scale it up to 50, 100 countries. So that's our hopeful collaboration going forward. But my last point here would be, We are also initiating a new program that would be focusing on central banks. This is greening the central bank. And what we have realized, focusing on the downstream project financing level is not sufficient. You're not going to be able to generate enough resources, neither you will be able to scale them up. We need upstream policy changes. And this is where the central banks actually come in. And on the 9th of November, we are launching our new program focusing on central banks, and we would invite Commonwealth Secretariat to join us to deliver on that program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chowdhury. And now we move to NORAD. Mr. Travick, we're delighted to have you join the partnership and collaborate with us. We've heard a lot about the importance of collaboration, of synergy, of working together. So we would like to hear from you in terms of the existing work of CFA and the call to ramp up, to enhance action on the ground. What is the perspective of NORAD in this regard? And how can we take this work forward at scale, acting fast now?
Thank you. And thank you so much, Madam Secretary General, for inviting me here. And thank you, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to be here. I have a little slide deck, so if that can come up, it would be good. For NORAD, we have a new strategy, brand new from this year. So climate and environment and nature is now key to the whole of the way we see our role as a development agency. So that means I have about 70 people working in my department to work on climate, environment, and these sort of issues every day. In my department, we invest about $1 billion every year. But all of NORAD's employees have this perspective in what they do, whether they work on health, on education, on other issues as well. Next slide, please. We are financing climate and nature-related actions through a number of channels. But maybe the important thing to be aware of is we are hearing what the honorable ministers said. We cannot just go back, even if we look good in our blue suits, as the minister from Jamaica said. But we need to make sure that we actually change something. So Norwegian government has just announced that we will double the climate financing, and we will, within that, the portion going to adaptation will be tripled. So I think the intention and we hear you in the need to really scale up. This is something which is luckily in our case across the aisle. We just had a change in government. It was indicated by the previous government and followed up by this one. I can have the next slide, please. We've been very happy to work concretely with the UNOSAT and with the Commonwealth Secretariat. We believe, as also was touched upon by the NDC partnership, that having the data tools, the data points, the knowledge is key to building good NDCs. So we're very happy about the experience from this program. We would like to look into how we can build on that experience. I would also like to say that in general, we're looking at how can we use data in a better way for development. Next slide, please. We are also right now in the process of strengthening our work with the NDC partnership. It is one of the building blocks for us in being able to also to work closer with you. We believe that the work that the NDC partnership does is also very useful for bilateral donors to understand where are the gaps, what are the things that we should do together, and where is the area that Norway has a specific competence that is useful to Belize or to Jamaica or to a specific country. Next slide, please. I would also like to do one sort of little promotion. Satellite data are important and they are expensive. We have therefore decided to make satellite data for development freely available. So we have bought satellite data from 30 degrees north to 30 degrees south. So basically the whole landmass there is covered by satellite pictures. Any development institution, any government, any UN agency that needs satellite pictures can get them for free here. We're also supporting better analysis of these data once they're available. So to anyone who buys satellite data, look into whether you actually have to do that. Last slide, please. This is a new program, but we are pretty convinced that this is useful. We have users from 136 countries already, thousands of registered users, and millions of new products created through this imagery. So in general, that is something that in our development policy, in our climate development policy, we want to look at how can we use data power for the good of development more generally. We have been here together for quite some time. I'm sure we could all speak about this for hours, but in the interest of time, I'd like to thank you for your attention and stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much to the NDC Partnership and to NORAD. We're looking forward to continuing the collaboration and to achieving, concrete action on the ground. But to wrap up this segment, we'd like to invite Honorable Kavidas Ramano to give his reflections, as well as our Honorable Secretary General. I invite Honorable Minister Ramano to please give us his reflections on this section, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have discussed some major issues which are common to all the countries who form part of the Commonwealth and who are facing dramatic concerns as to climate change. I think one of the gist of the discussion and the breakthrough eventually for us to come with constructive measures to combat climate change is a financing aspect. I think we have discussed some common issues. I think the proposal to have a common platform is very advisable for us to share our experience and to share also our proposals to eventually tackle this problem. I think there is one issue which is worth mentioning also, is the de-risking of investment. Because when we talk about issues of financing, we talk of major capital projects, the issue of insurance always come into play. I think we need also to address this problem. Thank you.
Can I just say how absolutely thrilled I've been not only to listen to each of the ministers describe with such passion and accuracy the enormity of the problem, but how warmed I am that every single one of them highlighted partnership, contribution, real action, and it's not just what we're saying here in Glasgow. We're all asking the question, what do we now do? Not what we now say, what are we now going to do? And the commitment from this platform has been amazing. And I want to say to the NDC partnership, when Jahan said that we need to scale up and we need to have more than 50 countries. I think he said 100 countries. Can I remind him that we have 53? So I'm going to say yes immediately and thank you. And as for NORAD, I hope that you have delighted in the relationship that we have had to date, because if you like, we have been piloting what works. But what our countries have demonstrated is that it does work. And we wanted cost-efficient, cost-effective action on the ground, which would make a quantifiable difference. And I think what the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub has demonstrated beyond peradventure is that we can make a difference if we choose to work together. And I'm thrilled that all of us here present are making that choice. But it's really important for us to remember it is not just the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. We have common sensing. And so, dear NORAD, I am saying thank you and yes, we want all your data, because empirical data is going to set us free. And so the common sensing, we'd like to roll it out for all our countries to help us with the Living Lands Charter, which I hope we will commit to when we go to CHOGM, hopefully next year. But look above, we've got also the Disaster Risk Finance Portal. All the analysis that's coming out of that disaster risk portal goes into the other work that we're doing. And this unified approach is going to make an enormous difference. So I would like to pledge to you, all my member states and our partners, that you will get total support from us and that we are already working with the development banks, and we will work even harder. Because I agree with what the NDC partnership has said, what Jehan said. We've got to go upstream as well as downstream. It's got to go right the way through. So I really thank all of you for your commitment, for your drive, and for your determination. And next year, when we come back to the next COP in Africa, it won't be talk. I hope we will be counting what have we done together. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we would be able to say that every single country who wanted a climate finance advisor had received one? Wouldn't it be fantastic to say that every official who needed training to build capacity had received it? And wouldn't it be even more wonderful if we actually managed to get 100% of that 100 billion delivered, and 50% of it was adaptation? Not a dream, but a reality. I want us just to hold what the Minister for Jamaica has said, but was reflected by all other ministers. For many of our countries, 1.5 is not just a target. It means whether you live or whether you die. And so those of us in our Commonwealth who are facing that stark reality, let's make sure that this death sentence that is holding over so many of us is removed. We can't afford to go above 1.1, which is where we are now. So let's not just adapt and mitigate, let's reverse it and keep all of us alive.
Thank you so much, SG. Colleagues, as we bring this to a close now, I would like to invite our Senior Director, Dr. Ruth Katomuri. She's Senior Director of the Economic, Youth and Sustainable Development Directorate at the Commonwealth Secretariat, for where the CFA sits. Dr. Ruth, please, for your closing remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you, Uzo. Secretary General, thank you for that wrapping up. Which motivates, as we could see, the leadership and motivation has been crucial in these things moving forward constantly from the time you have been the Secretary General. Honorable Ministers of our Commonwealth family, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you all for being here today in the midst of your busy schedules with so much happening at COP26. COP26 is crucial for the world to progress with implementation of our nationally determined targets, which have been updated by many of our member countries in 2021. And critical to achieving these targets is access to climate finance. And as the Secretary General mentioned, the Commonwealth Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen, has been committed from 2015 to enable access to climate finance through our Climate Finance Access Hub, of which you have heard some evidence in the presentation today, as well as in the opening remarks, in the video and the opening remarks. The Commonwealth Secretariat is also happy to be partnering closely with our member countries, and today has been a privilege to be able to hear experiences directly from all our ministers about the challenges and the opportunities and sharing knowledge between our member countries. So the important question, Minister, of what next that you mentioned. The Commonwealth Secretariat, through the Finance Hub, are strongly committed to delivering the much needed climate finance for our countries. We are in the process of deepening, strengthening, and expanding our Climate Finance Access Hub. And we heard from the Minister from Maldives, which is the newest addition to this partnership of our hub. I wish to conclude with our special thanks to our partners, Mauritius, who kindly hosts the Climate Finance Hub. Our collaboration with NDC Partnership and NORAD is crucial in this journey for our Secretariat to help and work with our 54 member countries and 2.5 billion people. Jahan, I'm glad you're still here. We can start with the 35 countries you have already developed the structure for. And with you, I would join and say, and you have demonstrated that it is doable. And my thing is that it was doable yesterday. So we can do it very quickly, fast, moving forward, working together, starting with 35 countries you mentioned. Travik, it's great, an excellent initiative that you've been able to provide free data. And so since you have already done it, I think it's resource efficient so that we don't have to reinvent the same wheel, but we will be working very closely with you. And finally, I want to thank all our Secretariat team and my climate change team, Unni, Uzo, and all the advisors from across our countries. Thank you all for bringing us all together, and it's been an excellent opportunity for us to hear firsthand from all of you. Finally, thank you all for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May we please invite the honorable ministers for a photo session with the